this presentation, which is how the most popular version of the Quran today is actually unreliable according to Islamic scholars' own standards.
The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever says upon me that which I did not say, then let him take his seat in the fire. Anyone that says something that the Prophet didn't say, intentionally let him take his place in the fire, because you're lying against the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So what do these same scholars say about the readers or the transmitters of the Qur'ans? What do they say about them? So, here's like a list of them here. We're only going to be focusing on one reading, which is the Hafs reading, which he gets it from a guy called Asim. This is Yasser Qadhi's book. He says like 95% of the Muslim world reads from Hafs.
When you say most popular Quran, you're talking about the Hafs.
Yep.
And basically, if you were to go around to various places, if you were to add up everyone, you'd find that about 95% of Muslims are using the Hafs today. And as I understand it, it's because that was the version of that the Ottoman Empire favored. And so that one sort of drowned out over time. It drowned out other versions. But then for the 1924 Cairo edition, with the birthday of the Quran that people are mostly familiar with, they used the Hafs. And so this is what's distributed around the world. In other words, it's not something about this was just somehow recognized as the most reliable version. It's just the empire that took over in Islam. This was their local version. And so they spread it throughout their empire. And then when in the early 20th century, Muslims were saying, hey, we need a standardized version to send around the world. This is the one that had become most popular because of the Ottoman Empire. And that's the reason. It had nothing to do with like internal reliability or examining manuscripts or something like that. This is the most popular, and this is the one we're going with.
This is the most popular Quran. This is Hafs right here. And so, like I said, if you go to any Arabic version of the Quran, you open up in the first couple pages, you're going to see the chain of transmission. And so this is what it says here. So this is the Quran. It goes from Hafs, it goes to Asim, Abi Abdurrahman, it goes to Uthman, to Ali, to Zayd, Ubay, to Muhammad. And so that's the chain of narration. That's a chain of transmission for Hafs. So the question is now, are the narrators in this chain considered reliable? So now let's apply those scholars of hadith criticism when it comes to the transmitters of are they reliable or are they not, based on the standards that we saw. What happens when we apply that to this Quran here?
Muslim scholars eventually would assess the reliability of a hadith, and in order to get away just judging it based on its content, which would be subjective to some extent, you may not like what it's saying, and so you may think it's unreliable just because you don't like it, that they came up with a more objective method, which is just based on the transmission, the list of names. I got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so, all the way back to a companion of Muhammad who heard it from Muhammad, and that you look at this list of names and you assess the hadith, you assess the reliability of the hadith on the reliability of all the people on this list of names. So all the people who are transmitting this, are they reliable? If all these guys are reliable transmitters, then you can trust the hadith. And what you're doing now is you're saying that Qurans are the same. If you get a Quran and you know what it's saying in the Arabic, it's telling you this Quran came from so-and-so, who got it from so-and-so, who got it from so-and-so, who got it from so-and-so, all the way back to Muhammad. And you're saying we can take the exact same criteria for examining the reliability, the trustworthiness of the people who are transmitting it that's used in the hadith methodology and apply it right here to whether we are getting a reliable transmission of the Quran.
Exactly. So let's start with the first one on the list, Hafs. Is he considered reliable according to the scholarship that that David just summarized and laid out?
Of course he is. 95% of Muslims use that Quran. It's got to be the best of the best. But go ahead.
It's got to be. Imam Muslim, the one who compiled Sahih Muslim, what did he say? He said that Hafs is rejected in hadith. Okay. Al-Bukhari, I'm starting from the bottom going up. Al-Bukhari said they abandoned him. So he's abandoned in hadith. Okay.
Just to be clear, these are hadith scholars commenting on the reliability of this guy named Hafs. They're talking about him, how reliable a transmitter of narrations he is.
His hadith is weak. I intentionally abandoned him. Others said, Ibn Ma'in said he's not reliable. The Hafs reading is more correct than Shu'bah. Shu'bah is the other reading of Asim, but Shu'bah is more reliable than Hafs. So he's saying, hey, look, so Asim, these two students that he had, Hafs and Shu'bah, yes, Hafs is a better, more correct than him in terms of the reading, but Shu'bah is more reliable, more trustworthy. Ahmad bin Hanbal said that he's rejected in hadith. So it gets even worse. So let's go to the next slide here. So we talked about Al-Bukhari and Muslim. Now let's go to An-Nisa'i. I said he is not reliable and his hadith should not be written down. And he said in another place, he rejected in hadith. As-Saji, this one is very, very interesting here. He says, he narrated from someone who's rejected and in others, and he says he fabricated hadith. So that's a huge charge to say that Hafs fabricated hadith.
Yeah, that's different from saying, like, I can say you have a weak memory, but if I say you fabricated stuff, that's you're inventing stuff.
And what did Muhammad say about someone who invents stuff?
Yeah, you're going to hell.
Yeah, exactly.
One-way ticket to hell.
Exactly. So another one, he's weak in hadith. Now here we have another interesting part here where it says that Ibn Khirash says he is a liar. He's rejected. Why? Because fabricating hadith. He fabricates hadith. So he's a liar. He's actually called a liar.
Guys, understand this. So what you were told just a few years ago by Muslim scholars and Dawah guys, there's only one Quran perfectly preserved. Any two Qurans you could ever find anywhere in the history of Islam line up perfectly, dot for dot, letter for letter. That's what we were all told. It was all complete nonsense. It was all complete lies. You look at the actual history of Islam, entire chapters came up missing because Muslims were too lazy to recite them. Large passages came up missing because the only people who had those passages memorized died in battle. Verses are eaten by a sheep or a goat, depending on your source. Over 200 verses were lost just from Surah 33 alone. And then you ended up with all these differences in the way people were reciting the Quran. Uthman, it becomes such a problem that Uthman, the third of the rightly guided caliphs, orders everyone to hand over whatever copies they have of the Quran, burns them all, puts out a standardized version, and before not too long, you end up with dozens of versions of the Quran, dozens of different versions of the Quran. Some guy comes along and says, I'm imposing these 7. I'm saying these are the 7 good ones. We're rejecting all the rest. Someone comes along after him and says, no, we need to add a few more. These guys are all making decisions about what is and is not considered the Quran. Like, what authority do these guys have to make those kinds of decisions? So this is going on all along. And so you have different versions of the Quran, and those different versions of the Quran come through different chains of transmitters. So how did you get this version of the Quran? Well, this version of the Quran came from so-and-so, who got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so, all the way back to Muhammad. This version of the Quran, it came from so-and-so, who got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so. You ended up with a situation where one particular version of the Quran, not because it was especially reliable, not because they went to manuscripts, but just because that's the one the Ottoman Empire spread when it controlled the Muslim world, that one became most popular. But here we have Jai and Daughter of Christ, and they're going through what Muslim scholars in the area of the reliability of transmissions are saying about the guy who transmitted the most popular version of the Quran in the world. 95% of Muslims use this Quran, and they're just applying the methodology from hadith studies, who's reliable and who's not, and they're pointing out that the guy who's responsible for the Quran that is used by 95% of Muslims in the world is transmitted by a guy who was a known fabricator and liar. What's that mean? If this guy were transmitting a hadith, they would not trust him. But he's the one who gives 95% of Muslims their Quran. They wouldn't trust this guy with a story about Muhammad. They wouldn't trust him. But you trust him with the Quran?
Yeah, actually, there's something else as well. He's also a thief. Yahya bin Sa'id said from Shu'bah. Now, Shu'bah was the other student of Asim. He's the other canonical reader. He said, Hafs bin Sulayman took a book from me and did not return it. And he used to take people's books to copy them.
So we can say that the Quran that is most widely used among Muslims in the world today was transmitted to them by a known liar, fabricator, and thief.